Brothers Brian and Danny Chick, plus Chris Anderson, whichever one happens to show up.
Breaking news, Muscatine is still standing. 2 chicks and a Chris are here to talk about it.
It's 2 Chicks and a Chris, part of Discover Muscatine. Now here's Brian.
Hello, Muscatine. Welcome to this week's episode of 2 Chicks and a Chris with Danny, Brian. We were Chrisless a minute ago, but now we are back with Chris.
We wasn't really Chrisless. We had one Chris.
We had one Chris, but Chris's, 2 S's up there. Anyway, what is going on in Muscatine this week? Dan, supervisor, you get your budget done?
The budget is in the final stages. We have a public meeting coming up, I think, on the 14th.
Did you give them their raise? Don't worry about the meeting. Did they get their raise?
Everybody got more money than they should
have.
Here's
money, everybody got money, everybody got their money.
Everybody probably got more money than they should have.
I thought you said we're poor.
Well.
Next thing you're giving raises.
Well.
How's it work in that county?
I try to make it reasonable raises.
Did they get it?
I do want to take care of the county employees, but
did they
I want to make it reasonable.
Reasonable? What's reasonable?
I'm a 3% kind of guy.
I like 8.
You like 8? Well, some of them do too.
You work for the county,
some
you
of them
get
like 8, 10, 12.
Well, I mean, if you're going to give it, why wouldn't you take it?
Yeah, if you're going to keep giving it, I guess I'd keep asking.
Would you take a 12% raise, Emily?
Yes, but no, probably not. Working at MCSA.
Yeah. Anyway,
you can at least introduce her before you just like totally Shanghai her into the middle of a raise conversation.
Well, I mean, why would you not take a 12% raise, right? Anyway, we have a great show coming at you. We got Emily Harvey from the MCSA, the new executive director. It's a really hard job over there at MCSA. We know you deal with lots of everything, so tell us about your role, your dreams, your visions. How are you going to take it to the next level, be better than the last person?
Well, I don't know if it's possible to be better than the last person, but I definitely am excited for what MCSA is working on.
Okay, I have to interrupt.
Yeah.
Think of that 12% raise.
No, it was Bob Albee. You can do better.
Oh my gosh, no, Bob's incredible.
Bob, I love you. Sorry, I just had
We always do better.
No, as you were saying.
Is he part of your raise part?
Okay.
Probably not.
This is brutal. Nobody's ever going to come on the show. As you were saying.
All right, sorry.
I'm really excited for what MCSA is working on. We're working on building a new permanent supportive housing apartment complex, and that is really what kind of the next stage of housing that is needed for the Muscatine area is. Muscatine is really in short supply of housing, and we're really in short supply of housing for people who are experiencing chronic homelessness and disabilities. And so what permanent supportive housing can do, the research shows that it can help reduce the number of hospital visits. It can reduce the number of interactions with the criminal justice system. It can reduce the cost to the taxpayer exponentially. The Iowa City community did a research study on this and found that individuals who are experiencing chronic homelessness can cost, that 4 individuals cost over $2.7 million over the course of 5 years for their community. And they were still homeless at the end of the day, simply because of the toll of homelessness and the interactions that they were having with the criminal justice system, the hospital system, different nonprofits, and still weren't able to achieve housing. And so providing permanent supportive housing costs a fraction of what allowing people to continue to experience homelessness costs. And it provides wraparound services that can allow people with disabilities and who experience long-term homelessness to stay housed. 75% of people stay housed for up to 2 years or longer. 50% stay housed for up to 5 years or longer. And so we're looking at really successful outcomes for people who are sometimes people who experience some of the most difficult barriers to achieving and maintaining housing. So we're really excited about our new apartment complex and what it can help do for some of the people who sometimes have the hardest times with housing in our community here. So that's one big project we're working on right now, and it'll be a new project for MCSA.
How many residents, before we get into your new projects, how many residents do you see day to day in your facility, and what services are provided? I know you got some that have some apartments upstairs, I believe.
Yeah.
Explain how that process works, and then explain your in and out and kind of your daily numbers.
Sure. So last year for 2024, we provided emergency shelter and shelter through our domestic violence shelter to about 280 adults, including about 50 children. And so they come in, they receive ongoing case management and potentially financial assistance with rent deposit, ongoing rent, utilities assistance, case management to help them find housing, maintain housing, and work with landlords in the community, work with Section 8 if they're eligible for Section 8, help with employment skills, accessing health care. We have multiple healthcare clinics on site. We have community health care, a dental clinic. We have Robert Young Behavioral Health Services. We have Dr. Corpy's Vision Clinic. So we have the ability to help address multiple needs for adults, children, whole households while they're there in our facility. So we served quite a few households through our emergency shelter program. We do also have homeless prevention and direct assistance programs. So the idea is to hopefully try to prevent people from becoming homeless, especially children. So last year we served over 1,200 people, including over 500 children. We were able to provide rent and utilities assistance for several months to help people who were at risk of losing their housing, so received an eviction notice and had back rent due or couldn't pay their rent moving forward, or people who lost their housing, but we were able to quickly help them obtain new housing and pay rent and utilities and deposit without them even needing to enter shelter. So that is a really big component of what we do, is helping people just even subvert the shelter system entirely and become stay housed or enter housing without needing to enter the shelter system.
What's the criteria for somebody that asks for assistance, that doesn't live in the shelter, asks for assistance with rent or other things? Because now that I've taken over for Brian's job last few months here, I've realized that MCSA does help in them situations, and I'm always worried that people are taking advantage of it. And so what's the criteria that...
So it's actually, it kind of starts at the federal level with HUD. And so HUD has required that every state organize itself into homeless organization systems. And so we're in a 6-county area. And we're the lead agency for our 6-county area. Most of our counties are rural areas. We're the Southeast system. And so anybody who is trying to access services first has to enter the homeless system portal, and then MCSA has to reach out to them within 48 hours, potentially a few days more than that. And then we administer what's called the VI-SPDAT, and it's very technical. It's an evidence-based assessment tool, and it goes through the household and it asks them a series of questions, and then it assigns them a score, and it puts them on a prioritization list. And then every agency within the 6-county area gets together for what's called pull meetings. And then we go through, and instead of first come, first serve, we go through that list in terms of prioritization, and we pull households. Every agency goes through and pulls households and says, I have these programs, these resources. I'll take this family and assist them. We're in the same county. Muscatine will go through and say, we have these resources. We'll take this family. We'll assist them. We're in Muscatine County. Burlington, Cedar Lee, Des Moines, we kind of get together and do that. Despite being in the 6-county area, we really only serve about 10% of people out of county. And the length of stay for our out of county families is only about 7 days. So we really are truly spending our resources on people who are residents of Muscatine County.
I think there's a perception out there, and I've been told by some other people that they've seen vehicles or buses that are dropping people off, and whether it's from, sounds like Burlington, Davenport, Iowa City, and they have I was told maybe they have a 45-day allowance, and we may have a 90, and so people were maybe pushing some of their homelessness on our shelter. Is that an accurate statement, or what's your thoughts on that?
What I can tell you is people tend to go to communities where there are more resources, and it's not that Muscatine doesn't have resources, but we are a smaller community here, and so it makes more sense for people to go to larger communities where there are more resources. So occasionally we get people who come here from out of the area. I would say it's potentially more likely for our domestic violence shelter, simply because in those cases people may be trying to leave an unsafe situation, and for them it may be more safe to leave and travel a further distance. However, what our data shows us, going through, for example, all of our data for 2024, we only served about 10 to 15% of our people between our two shelters from out of Muscatine County, and their average length of stay was 6.9 days. And for 2023, we were similar numbers. So there are people who, come to this area, but they're more likely to potentially be here a short amount of time and then move on in their destination. Like they're traveling further, and this happens to be a stop on their way, is what we seem to see in our experience at MCSA. Doesn't mean other nonprofits or other people working in this field are seeing something different. But
so when you build your new place by Hy-Vee, how many rooms is that going to be?
It's going to have 21 units. They're going to be single adults.
Will that lighten the load at MCSA, or have 21 more homelessness in Muscatine? Is the numbers going to jump when that gets done?
Does it increase by 21, or we maintain the same population here, and does that give you more capacity?
Because I did hear in the past that there's a lot of code violations at the current place, and it may be cheaper to do something like what you're doing now. And
what's really going to happen is that we have people, for example, like our stats, our exits to we look at outcomes, not just kind of placeholder outcomes. So we're looking at outcomes like how many people we serve, but also how many people are exiting to positive housing destinations. And so, for example, between our two shelters, we have about 53% of people exiting to positive housing destinations. And that's better than the national average, but we want to be doing better than that. And part of the reason that we are not doing better than that right now is because we have people who are experiencing chronic homelessness. So they're people who, kind of like Pastor Sharon was talking about, they're people who are not necessarily going to be successful in their own independent housing. They may not have enough income. Muscatine is actually the third most expensive city in the state of Iowa for rental income. And Muscatine actually has a higher percentage of poverty than the national average. We're running about 17% at poverty rate here, and the national average is around 12. So we have people here who don't have enough income to support themselves in rental housing or to buy homes. And we also have people who have potentially disabilities that may prevent them from maintaining themselves independently in housing. And so what's happening is we've got people in shelters who we're able to work with, and they're able to achieve independent housing successfully. And then we've got people who there's not a place for them in our community. And what our permanent supportive housing complex will do is provide 24/7 staff and supportive services, so that these are the people who will finally have a place where they can live and be housed and not necessarily be out on the streets or in emergency rooms or interacting with the criminal justice system. And it'll improve our exits to permanent housing. It'll improve housing stability. And so my long-winded answer to your question is we're going to be taking the people we already serve, and instead of kind of having them maybe languish in shelter or kind of a revolving door sometimes, or trying to put them in housing and it's not working, they'll have a place where they can go and potentially actually stay long-term.
I'm going to ask you a hard question now.
Yeah.
So when I was doing rentals
Yeah.
before that, and we would get an application and they come from the MCSA,
Mm-hmm.
you guys would pay their rent for sometimes 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
Does that number fall off your books that they're not homeless no more? And then once you stop paying it, usually they come right back. How come you pay it so long?
It really depends. It's case by case. MCSA has actually created and run one of the most successful rental assistance programs in the state of Iowa. Our staff and our program director have been recognized at the state level for this program and what it's achieving in Muscatine. And we've been able to bring more than $2.2 million into Muscatine for rent and utilities assistance, just to help Muscatine residents become housed and stay housed. And so really what happens is this is a relationship between our housing navigators and the families, and they really determine, and working with the landlords and kind of depending on communication with the landlords and how involved they want to be, but looking at income verification and personal goals and determining how much assistance is needed. And sometimes it's a plan where the same assistance is provided every month for a set amount of time. Sometimes assistance tapers off to a gradual endpoint. Sometimes it's only 1 month of assistance. Sometimes it's longer. It really is tailored to what a family or household needs, hopefully for their best success. And there are guidelines set so that we typically aren't able to assist families if they're coming back to us. So we're not just kind of
revolving door.
Yeah, a revolving door. Now there are, case by case exceptions if there's something extreme that happens in a household or with a property that a landlord may be renting. But that is something that we do work very carefully with our case managers and our families on.
Is that the only facility currently in your plans at this time? And there isn't more on the horizon or anything, is there?
So that's the only one right now that we're building and for permanent supportive housing. And that does mean we have to have a very specific definition for the people we're serving. So that is for people who have a diagnosed disability and have experienced at least 12 months of homelessness, verifiable homelessness. We are building 6 single-family homes, and we received grant funding.
Yeah, you got 1.8 million on that. They were supposed to be the 3D homes.
Yeah,
but that program, I'm not a big 3D house fan. I don't think they're effective, and
they're just not ready yet.
I just don't think they're
well,
where they
and
need to be.
I think we kind
the
of
state
realized
let you switch that grant money, that 1.8 over to stick-built homes.
Yes. We kind of, I think, realized that along the way that we weren't in a position to quite manage or work with the 3D technology at this moment. So the state allowed us to change that.
And with those funds, it's kind of like a revolving loan fund, because if you can take the proceeds when you sell those homes and can continue to maybe clean up that area, mostly over there around IV.
And the plan is to sell these homes. These homes will be for sale. We're hoping to target educators since it's been difficult and to have to bring teachers into the community and retain teachers. So, but that's not a requirement of the grant. But we're hoping to sell these homes to educators at 80% AMI. So they'll be a little bit more affordable, but still brand new homes in revitalizing the neighborhood area. And slightly more affordable. So
I thought I heard Scott say one time before, before you was in there, that there was some talk about maybe getting these homes going in these small apartment complexes where you may even consider shutting this place down. Is there any truth to that at all, or
I'm not.
Is that a conversation?
I'm not sure about that 100%. We do have a lot of, maintenance needs we need to address with that facility, and we'll need to be having some conversations and figuring out what that looks like long term. But you're right, we do have the 35 men's dorm room units upstairs, and so that's something we would need to kind of figure out. It's been a staple in the Muscatine community. They're $350 a month, and it's dorm style living, so it's a single room for single adult men, and they share common bathrooms and have access to like cooking appliances and things like that. Not a full kitchen, but and it's been a really nice kind of combination of very affordable housing, but also kind of somewhat supported housing. They have access to front desk staff downstairs and the property manager, and janitorial services and things like that occasionally. And again, we have the clinics downstairs. So there's quite a bit over there that we'd want to make sure we had a way to somehow still have access to or replicate.
Can you rent to them?
What's that?
The clinics if they shut down?
Say that again?
Can you rent to the clinics if they shut down over to new building? Business opportunity.
Yeah, geez. Okay. So here's, I think, I always try and take a step back and not look at each individual tree, but look at the forest, right? And I think the one thing that I don't know anywhere near enough about it to talk intelligently, but I'm going to anyway. And thanks, Ryan. Appreciate that. What I see is in any complex business, like banking, whatever, sometimes if you look at one tree of it, that one individual tree may not make sense. Like if somebody has an experience where they think they see, and that's also a key thing, they think they see people getting dropped off, it could look like, well, that's a dumb idea. But then when you put it all in the big picture of what you're actually trying to accomplish, it all works. And I think it's really easy to just kind of go, oh yeah, that makes no sense. We could do something better. And I think this falls into a category that's very similar to healthcare when you get into the preventative care concept, and even like cars, right? We all know that it's cheaper to change the oil and rotate the tires and do all that stuff than to fix all the stuff that blows up. And the permanent housing is very much one of those things. We've been using a emergency Band-Aid for a long-term problem. And yes, you do have to invest to solve the long-term problem. That's way cheaper than using the emergency room function all the time. And it's kind of one of those things that, like, in order to really understand it, you've got to put the effort in to dive in and learn a chunk, right? And the one thing that I will say about MCSA and everybody that I've ever talked to from there is you guys have always done a good job of helping people try and understand the forest a little better. Because it is, like we had some properties for a while, like sometimes something a business or organization doesn't necessarily make sense in that one little narrow picture. But, even thinking about, I was just doing some rough math, if you figure average rent for a 2-3 bedroom apartment, let's call it $800
to 1,000,
800 to 1,000. Okay. So let's say that, and let's put some real numbers to like these interactions with the Justice Department, right? So how much does a police officer get paid an hour? I have no idea, but
50-60 grand, average 60 grand.
60 grand an hour?
No,
they must work for the county.
60 grand a year.
Did you approve that?
They got them raises.
Yeah, well, they did get a bunch of raises. So
no. But here's the thing. Let's just say it's 50 an hour, average, whatever, right? You throw a couple hours of police in there, a couple hours of police oversight for that sheriff or for that officer, then, throw in some county attorney time, throw in a couple other things.
ER visits,
you're going to get to $1,000 really quick.
Yeah,
right?
average ER visit in Iowa is $1,500.
Right. So, like, if you can even, as crazy as it sounds on one hand, if you can put somebody in something, pay $800 a month, and they're safe and they're, hopefully not getting hurt or whatever, it can actually be cheaper for the community in the long run, even though it doesn't necessarily. And I hate to say it this way, but I can't think of another way to say it. It doesn't feel right. Sometimes it feels like maybe they're trying to take advantage of the system or whatever, but practically it's still our best option. You know, it's a catch-22.
The worst of worst of the best.
It's a double-edged sword. I mean, I think over the course of my life, it's probably it's a nationwide problem, but we've seen it increase in Muscatine. You know, I've been here my whole life. I'm 55. Brian's going to be 51. And
God, you guys are old.
Chris is 1,000 or something.
I'm 45.
But the point is, when we was growing up, there was a couple homeless people in Muscatine. Hell, we knew their names usually, and now the problem has grown. You know, and we don't want to be a haven. Me personally, I don't want Muscatine to be a haven for homelessness.
That's understandable.
Because I mean, there was two guys between a building of mine that I run the other day over by Hy-Vee that they was living there. They set up camp, and you know, I had to ask them to move, and they was polite and did what they had to do. And you know, it led to another question. Maybe back in January, maybe December, we had a guy that was living in the timber behind Contrary, zero out. And I caught him down there. He had a fire and everything else, and we couldn't have that for safety reasons, right beside the business and stuff like that. And I asked him about, you know, going to MCSA, and I think he had been there a couple times and said he had issues there, which draws me to the question where when you have those issues, I know there's sometimes they cause issues for your other residents, and you can't have them there. So it seems to be a problem that's growing, and I guess I get concerned when we build a new facility, or we're talking about other things that we're making it a haven for homelessness. And me personally, that's not what I want to see for Muscatine.
No, that's completely understandable. And I think, and it's good to have that perspective so that, you know, because I don't want to, you know, have my blinders on and just be excited because it's more resources and something that can help. Definitely just from the data that we have and from a spectrum of services, it feels to me like what we're doing is completing kind of a ladder, and what we're doing is bringing in more comprehensive services so that we can start addressing and providing a type of service and a type of housing to people who are already here and technically residents and are just falling through the cracks. And so I don't think that will be bringing more people here because permanent supportive housing has already been in the Quad Cities for several years, and they have it in other cities around here. And I'm not trying to, you know, pick on Muscatine with that. It's not like we're bringing a new service here that is, you know, cutting edge or something that is going to attract more
Muscatine.
people.
We don't do anything cutting edge.
No, I actually do think Muscatine is one of the most innovative and collaborative places I've ever been, and I love that about Muscatine. But we're not doing anything that doesn't already exist in the communities around us, and it really is something that I think is just going to, like, we can already identify 10 plus people here in the community who would be eligible and would benefit from apartments at our new apartment complex, because we see them in our shelter, we see them on the street, and they just don't have a place to go. But that would be something that would really help stabilize them. And so that to me is kind of the difference here. However, but yeah, you're completely right about kind of where do you kind of help make sure you're not just like putting up a big neon sign.
Right.
And the reality is that, you know, between 2023 and 2024, homelessness in the state of Iowa went up by more than 50%. So it's just everywhere increasing.
Yeah, I mean, mental health, drug use is through the roof across the country, and I think that leads to, you know, that's led to the homelessness problem across the country, and probably in Iowa and Muscatine. And
well, I think there's one other factor. Brian, I need you to do me a favor. Could you take his glasses off and see if they're like rosy colored time travel glasses? Because sometimes, like, now here's the thing. I was a kid of the 80s, right? And I'm very fond of my Gen X roots, and, you know, we went uphill both ways and all that stuff. And I do think we, in some ways, were tougher is not the right word, but just different. Like, but sometimes, like, and just, I love picking on Danny. This is great. When you said like there were 2 homeless people, well, here's the thing.
I always exaggerate a little bit. There might have been 3.
Well, and that's, But and we've talked about this, right? Like
Murdoch.
you say
Jeff
too,
Murdoch. Jeff
but
Murdoch.
here's the thing. There was more, you just didn't see it, right? And it wasn't, it wasn't out. You didn't have social media where you could see it. You didn't have all these other things. And you also definitely weren't in a business where you see it all the time. And so it was, what I always like to think about is perspective wise, I try and think, okay, if I remember it this way, it was probably 20-30% worse than what I'm remembering. Because like I didn't see, you know what I mean?
Yeah, you're right. It's possible that it would exist.
Don't tell him he's right.
Yeah, you're not right.
Do not tell him that.
Well, no, and Danny and I, guys, just so off the air, we have these kinds of conversations all the time about like, what are we really saying? You know what I mean? And because Danny and I are both sarcastic, and we both I exaggerate for effect all the time because it works.
I'm the sweet one.
Just
So you know.
No, but like seriously, I do look fondly on the 80s, but if you look back, the 80s weren't all that great, right? In a lot of ways. And so I don't know if now is better or worse, how you would define it. Honestly, I think it's kind of a glass half full.
Well,
half
I think
empty.
you can look at, but here's where I think you're missing. I think you can look at the statistics and show that it's obviously gotten worse across the board.
Right. No, I didn't necessarily mean that, but what I mean is, okay, if there's a glass full of milk in front of you and it's got some milk in it, but not all the way to the top, whether it's half full or half empty, what would you say? You looked at a glass.
I'd say the opposite of you. That's what I know.
I know that, but I'm going to make you go first. What would you say?
I think it depends. If it was less than half, I'd probably say like
Drank a little.
half empty, and if it's more than half, I'd say like
wow, you really think about
half full.
Holy cow. Would that stress you out if I put that there and asked you? What would you say, Danny?
If he puts an Oreo in it.
If you put an Oreo in it, it's gone.
I would drink or add enough water to it to get it to where I want it to be.
Oh, that's okay. You've heard me say this before. What would you say?
It'd be half empty because I drank half.
You guys really didn't help my. But what I was going to say is like
I'd say half empty.
Right, and that would be, I would believe you would say that, right? Just the way you look at things, right? I don't care if it's half full, half empty. I don't want to sit around and argue about it. I want to go get more milk, and I want to fill it up because we can all agree that it needs more milk in it, right?
You don't drink it all; you just fill half up.
It's something.
I love the fact that he was going to put water in and water down the milk and
something to really take serious though is with the problem with the statistics showing across the local, state, nationwide that the numbers are increasing, and we throw more money at it, we throw more services at it. Are we really getting to the root cause?
Is it going to go away?
This isn't going away. We're never going to, you ain't going to, in 50 years from now, we're not going to have somebody sitting in this room and they're saying, oh, there's no more homelessness. We did a good job. We're not curing this. We're just treating, it's like somebody getting a cold. You got to go to the doctor and get some Mucinex or something.
So,
wow, you are not a physician. There's so many things wrong with that statement.
Anyway.
No, but is that kind of like how you guys look at it? I think sometimes it's like
you try not to be bigger than this number. Is there a number you're always going to be at, and you just try to ride
Actually, the way the federal government has always
that didn't bring any credibility here.
I know, but the way the federal government has always looked at the problem of homelessness is by trying to reach what they call functional zero. And that means that they don't believe necessarily that you'll ever achieve no homelessness, but what they want to see is that your community has enough housing, has enough resources, has enough support that the minute someone is identified as homeless, they immediately have access to a shelter bed, to permanent supportive housing, to rent utilities assistance, or to rental housing, or to buying a home if that's what they want to do and they have the ability to do that. It's more about the matter of like supply and demand and resources and support.
It's kind of similar to the unemployment concept. Like you're never going to have zero unemployment. There's structural unemployment that's always going to be there.
So, and they ironically, the goal was to achieve functional zero for veterans homelessness in 2010, and then it got pushed back and back and back, and to achieve functional zero for family homelessness shortly after that, and it just, the goal mark keeps getting moved because it is just not something
Probably
I've ever.
not a one of us want to see somebody homeless outside.
Mhm.
It, because we're all humans and all that.
Mhm.
But when you help somebody,
Mhm.
where's the point where you want them to? You guys offer, like, I always heard you kick them out at 8 o'clock in the morning to just whatever, go out streets, whatever they do. Is there a time the gym closes that they have to go out? Or they have to find a job, they have classes, they got goal marks. What do they have to do at the MCSA once they wake up
Sure.
from the gym?
So we do tend to kind of pack up the gym around between like 8 and 10 in the morning. They don't have to leave the building. We do have obviously case management and the peer support center, which is where we have a peer support specialist providing counseling, information referrals. She helps people sign up and apply for jobs or access like benefits or healthcare or do anything that they may do there. Her name is Stacy and she's phenomenal. And we have a lot of people, not just from MCSA, but like come in from the community to access her services or to go downstairs and access the clinics or the food pantry on Tuesdays. So people are not don't have to leave the building, but there are times when we just kind of are like, okay, time to get up and do some chores.
Try to be a little productive for
kind of
that.
get up and move
I like
around.
that.
And then we do tend to have if you're from out of county, then we do tend to put a 7-day limit on your stay. We may make an exception if you are, moving on your goals pretty quickly, like if you happen to find employment within those 7 days or are, or you're waiting for someone to come pick you up or you are saving up for a bus pass, things like that. Otherwise, we're typically a 90-day stay, although our average length of stay for most households is about 45 days. So our housing navigators are really good at getting people pretty much out in the community and housed. One of our most amazing programs, it was funded through a grant through HRSA, and that grant ended, but it was called Fueling the Future, and we worked with United Way and the Community Foundation and the city and Muscatine Community College. Had a lot of partners, but we had an economic navigator, and we would work with families where the children received the backpack nutrition subsidy program. So they were getting backpack food through the weekends. And our economic navigator would work with the parents or guardians in the household. And if they were interested, we would pay for them to enroll in technical classes at Muscatine Community College. And the whole point was to help them upskill and increase their income. And so we helped several households graduate through that program, and then we guaranteed them job placement with businesses in the community and really saw a lot of success with that program. So we would, in the meantime, if they needed assistance, like if obstacles to getting to classes were things like childcare or transportation, we could help with that. And the economic navigator kind of worked with them if there were issues with uniforms or exams at the end of classes and helped kind of work with them to get their job placements and meet their employers and things. And it was a really great program. So we are trying to do things to address more than just homelessness and more than just the lack of affordable housing. And it's really a lack of housing across the entire spectrum. But the lack of affordable housing, we're trying to look at kind of things across,
Right.
across the whole.
Goes with the income to house prices.
Yeah.
I don't know. It does take.
On your funding, on your revenue coming in, your funding sources. I know the county gives you some money from through the community services. The city provides some money, and then your other. I don't know if you get some money. Your state, federal. Explain your sources so people understand where all your funding comes
So
from.
for 2024, we were about 80% grant funded, and most of that was federal funding or federal pass-through funding. So pass through the state, administered by the state. And that doesn't include any of our construction projects. That's just our daily operations. Most of that comes from HUD. We have some from HRSA. And then our local funding largely is, we receive funding through the county. We receive some funding through the city. And then we have funding from United Way and Community Foundation. Let's see. So 80% grant funding. We're about 13% funded through donations and about 7% funded through rental income. So like the men's dorms or some of our scattered site housing where tenants pay rent or receive Section 8 rental assistance. So we're pretty heavily grant funded. That'll be changing over time. That's kind of subject to the grants we receive and what happens with those. But different programs are funded differently, like our domestic violence shelter is pretty much entirely funded by New Beginnings.
Speaking of that domestic violence shelter, for the ladies that may be in need out there, explain that service and process, and if somebody did need those services, how they could access them.
Of course, they can call our crisis line at any time. I apologize, I don't have the crisis line memorized.
I can put it on the screen.
Thank you. That's terrible. But they can call our crisis line day or night, and we have a professional who answers the phone and can help with safety planning, resources, information, but also if we have space available, can help assist with planning to bring someone in or their family into shelter. And we can even assist with transportation in some cases, not long-term, like long distance, but if they are in the community, we can sometimes assist with transportation. And again, similar lengths of stay, and we have case management services, and we'll have access to all kinds of other assistance and things like that.
Just to give them home protection where they can
it's
easily not be found, all confidential.
It's a confidential location, and in a locked facility, and it's actually a pretty nice and comfortable space for at this time single women and women with children, and they can access other services like go to MCSA and access the food pantry or the healthcare clinics, or we can bring food pantry items to them if they prefer. But yeah, it's here in Muscatine.
That's a great.
The one thing I was able to be a part of the last, 6-8 years, maybe, I don't know. The United Way granting committee, that looks at all the applications and helps put that initial plan together to recommend to the board. And we just wrapped up the last round. And the part that I really enjoy about it is you get to see applications from all these organizations, all the great stuff they're doing, and you can really start seeing how all the pieces fit together. And Muscatine, if you looked at us 20 years ago, we weren't this cohesive. Sometimes it feels like we're still siloed, but we really do a pretty decent job at it. And obviously there were some grants in there from you guys for some of the local programs and stuff. And what I feel comfortable saying is, looking at the budgets and all this stuff, yeah, can anybody always do 5% better? Of course. We all can, we always can. But honestly, you look at it across the board, I think most all of our nonprofits do a pretty good job across the board of identifying a problem, creating some sort of reasonable, logical metric for how to measure it and find a way to make it better. Get creative. Does it all work? No. Does some of it work? Yes. You put the gas to the stuff that works well. And the one thing that I love about this show, and that I would encourage anybody out there to do, is if you see something that doesn't seem to make sense to you, for instance, if you think people are getting dropped off, take a second and ask, right? Reach out to somebody at MCSA. Heck, reach out to, not Danny, but anybody else. But reach out and learn a little bit, because chances are there's a piece of information you're missing, and maybe there's an idea you can toss into the mix and see if it can help. So, I always love this part of the 2-year cycle because you get to see some really cool stuff.
Got a tear.
Yep.
Got a tear coming out. He did a good job.
Hey, well, no, it's because and I can do this myself. It's really,
I'd hug you right now.
Thank goodness for the desk. No, it's really easy. And I think everybody does this no matter what. Like when you look at something, you're like, oh, well, this could be better. This could be better. That's human nature, right? And yes, chances are it probably can be, right? Mm-hmm. But when you actually step back and go, holy cow, like you house 30 guys and this, and when you really think about that, that's like, holy crap, that's actually, pretty impressive, right? And that goes across the board. What are you smirking about?
I'm just listening to you.
Yeah, we're touched.
I'm just listening to you.
No, it's
Touched by you.
Can you always find things to do better? Of course. And I know you guys do, like everybody's like, yeah, if you've got a way to do it better, let's give it a whirl. Sort of.
We try to say, live life behind two chicks.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, and that's the one thing that I hope everybody gets when they watch this show is we may joke about it. We may even make some bad jokes. I mean, Danny's are good. Brian's are usually worse. No, but even if we're joking about it, it's something that we are trying to be part of a bigger, better conversation.
That's correct.
And, the only way you can do that is to learn and ask questions. And yes, do we look like idiots sometimes asking questions?
100%.
Absolutely, we do. That's our goal. But seriously, I mean, this is what you do. This is how a community gets better. And I appreciate you being willing to hop on after you said you watched episodes and still were willing to come. So
we was going to hook up a while back, and then we for some reason we never came together. We got going on a different track, but I'm glad you reached out and we got you in here. And
yeah, you do a thankless job there. I mean, it is.
Well, you could thank her right now, and then it wouldn't.
Thank you. But you're never gonna cure the problem. You're always gonna keep digging at it. Somebody's got to do it. Might as well be you. But do you like roundabouts?
Oh, I feel like this is a hot topic.
This is the hot topic. Shifting gears.
I don't mind them. I mean,
you treat them like a stop sign or a racetrack.
I will say that there is a place in Bettendorf where they have put like 3 roundabouts and it doesn't make any sense to me. But I have driven on roundabouts where I don't have a problem with them. They seem perfectly fine. So
what about back-end parking?
I do not understand the parking on Mississippi. I will say that seems very confusing to me. But I can't back up in a straight line, so that
settle down. That was a genius that put that process together.
What about
you should all be thankful Mike Cameron.
What about the two-way traffic all the way through town where you can't turn around? That's his. He likes that one, so be careful how you answer it.
Dumb.
I haven't noticed it, so I think it's fine.
Yeah.
Okay, that note.
It's time to end the show. It's time to end the show.
Anyway, thank you. One more question real quick. One more question. Where was you born?
Muscatine.
Chris, where was you born?
Muscatine.
I'm Muscatine, too. We are Muscatine. Have a good night.
That's a wrap on this episode of Two Chicks and a Chris. Make sure to follow, subscribe, and tell your friends, especially if they live in Muscatine and like questionable opinions. We'll catch you next time on Two Chicks and a Chris, where Muscatine news meets organized chaos.